certain themes that run through the Bible repeatedly, and when we see that, we need to pay attention. And in our Torah study this week, we studied about Balaam and Balak. But I want to start with this study. I want to start in Revelation chapter 2. Revelation chapter 2. This is this is where the angel spoke to the 7 assemblies of Asia. He spoke a different message to each one. He had different. If he spoke to as he speaks to our assembly, he's got something specific for us to say. But we're gonna read some of these things that he wrote to Pergamum, the church at Pergamos. In Revelation 2, verse 12, it says, "The angel or the messenger of the church in Pergamos write, These things saith he that has a sharp sword with 2 edges. I know thy works where you dwell, even where Satan's seat is. You hold fast my name, and has not denied my faith, even in those days wherein Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was slain among you, where Satan dwells. But in verse 14 he says, I have a few things against you, because you have there them that hold the doctrine of Balaam, which taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed to idols, and to commit fornication." So just the fact that they had some of these people in their congregation was an indictment against them. They shouldn't have allowed these people to be there that were teaching this. They were teaching the doctrine of Balaam. And I want to go into that a little bit. What was the doctrine of Balaam? And it's not real precise. I don't have a real precise definition, but we're going to go back in the book of Numbers and we're going to get some of the history on that so we can avoid this. You know, when this was written in Revelation, this was 1,500 years after the days of Balaam. So 1,500 years later, they're still dealing with this same spirit. And I believe today we're still these same spirits. Sin never changes. Evil spirits don't change. They just kind of disguise themselves in a different form and come back and they keep showing up. But so this spirit of Balaam, I think, is still with us today. But let's go to Numbers 22. Numbers 22. It says, the children of Israel came forward and they pitched in the plains of Moab on this side of Jordan by Jericho. And Balak, the son of Zippor, saw what Israel had done to the Amorites. Now, so Balak was getting scared because he saw Israel was coming on, and they were conquering their enemies, and they couldn't be stopped, and so he was really afraid. And so, in verse 5 it says, he sent messengers therefore to Balaam the son of Beor to Pethor, which is by the river of the land of the children of his people, to call him, saying, Behold, there is a people come out from Egypt. Behold, they cover the face of the earth, and they abide against me. Come now, therefore, I pray thee, and curse this people, for they are too mighty for me. Peradventure I shall prevail. Peradventure I shall prevail, and that we may smite them, that I may drive them out of the land. For I know that he whom thou blessest is blessed, and he whom thou cursest is cursed. So Balak knew that Balaam was a prophet. And this Balaam, he was a pretty gifted person. If he was here today, he'd probably have a YouTube channel. He'd be a YouTube influencer because he was a very successful prophet. I mean, he really had timely words. And he had a connection with Yahweh, believe it or not. He had a connection with Yahweh. Yahweh was speaking to him. They had conversations back and forth. But he was, see, prophets don't always do what they're supposed to do. Just because you're a prophet, you may be a holy anointed prophet, that doesn't mean you always do the right things. Sometimes they do the wrong things, and it causes heartache. But in verse 7, it says, the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the rewards of divination in their hand. In other words, they were going to pay him for his services. He was going to do this spiritual magic on him, basically, because they were wanting him to put a curse on these people. And he said, lodge here this night, and I'll bring you word again as Yahweh shall speak to me. So the princes of Moab abode there with Balaam. They hung around to see what the answer was. And Elohim came to Balaam and said, "What men are these with thee?" Now, this was an actual conversation. This was he wasn't just making this up. And Balaam said to Elohim, "Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab, has sent unto me, saying, Behold, there is a people out of Egypt, which covers the face of the earth." So you had multitudes of people, like a couple million people. It covered the earth. "Come now, curse me them. Peradventure I shall be able to overcome them and drive them out." And Elohim said to Balaam, "You shall not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed." There was his answer. So Balaam rose up in the morning. He said to the princes of Balak, "Go into your land, for Yahweh has refused for me to go with you." And the princes of Moab rose up, and they went to Balak and said, "Balaam refuses to come with us." So Balak, he didn't give up. He sent more princes. The devil don't give up. You know what? He keeps coming back. So Balak sent yet again princes, more and more honorable than they. And they came to Balaam and said to him, "Thus saith Balak, the son of Zippor, Let nothing, I pray thee, hinder thee from coming unto me. I will promote you unto very great honor. I'll do whatever it takes. You name your price. I will do whatever you say to me. Come therefore, I pray thee, curse me this people." And Balaam answered and said to the servants of Balak, If Balak would give me a house full of silver and gold, I cannot go beyond the word of Yahweh my Elohim to do less or more. Now therefore I pray you, tarry ye also here this night, that I may know what Yahweh will say unto me more. So he's kind of opened the door for another answer. And Elohim came unto Balaam at night and said unto him, If the men come to you, rise up and go with them. But yet the word which I shall say unto you, thou shalt do. And Balaam rose up in the morning and saddled his ass. So he didn't wait for him to come. He just got up and said, "I'm going." He was kind of excited about it. He liked the glory of being the prophet, the one that was being called on. So Balaam rose up in the morning, saddled his ass, and went in with the princes of Moab. And Yahweh's anger was kindled because he went. And the angel of Yahweh stood in the way for an adversary against him. He was riding on his ass, and his 2 servants were with him. And the ass saw the angel of Yahweh standing in the way. So Balaam didn't even have the ability to see this angel of Yahweh standing in front of him. And so the ass kind of went off the road and got off on the pasture. And so he hit him, get back to straighten him up. And then in verse 24, the angel of Yahweh stood in the path of the vineyards, a wall being on this side and a wall on that side. When the ass saw the angel of Yahweh, she thrust herself into the wall and crushed his foot against the wall. And he smote her again. And then the angel of Yahweh went further and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn, either to the right or to the left. And when the ass saw the angel of Yahweh, she fell down under Balaam. And Balaam's anger was kindled. He smote the ass with a staff. And Yahweh opened the mouth of the ass, and she said to Balaam, "What have I done unto thee? You have smitten me these 3 times." Now here, he didn't have sense enough to recognize it was unusual for this donkey to be talking to him. He started talking back. But Balaam said to the ass, "Because you have mocked me, I would that there was a sword in my hand, I would have killed you." And the ass said to Balaam, "Am not I thine ass, upon which you have ridden ever since I was thine unto this day? Was I ever wont to do such unto thee?" And he said, "No." Then Yahweh opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of Yahweh standing in the way with his sword drawn in his hand. And he bowed down his head, and he fell flat on his face. This is quite an experience. I mean, this is not just your average trip down the road. So Balaam had some real experiences in his life, didn't he? And the angel of Yahweh said to him, "Wherefore hast thou smitten thine ass these 3 times? Behold, I went to withstand thee, because your way is perverse before me. And the ass saw me and turned from me these 3 times. Unless you had turned from me, surely now I would have slain thee and saved her alive." And Balaam said to the angel of Yahweh, "I have sinned, for I knew not that thou stood in the way against me. Now therefore, if it did please thee, I will go back again." The angel of Yahweh said to Balaam, "Go with the men, but only the word I shall speak unto you, that you shall speak." So Balaam went with the princes of Balak. And so they went out to meet him, In verse 37, Balak said to Balaam, didn't I earnestly send unto thee to call thee? Wherefore camest thou not unto me? Am I not able to promote thee to honor? I can do all kinds of things for you, said. But Balaam said to Balak, lo, I am coming to thee. Have I any power at all to say anything? The word that Elohim puts in my mouth, that shall I speak. And Balaam went with Balak, and they came to Kirjath Huzoth. And Balak offered oxen and sheep, and sent to Balaam and to the princes that were with him. And in chapter 23, they went to a lot of trouble. They built an altar, and they had 7 oxen, 7 rams. So they were deeply invested in this whole project, you know. And Balak did as Balaam had spoken. And Balak and Balaam offered on every altar a bull and a ram. And Balaam said to Balak, stand by thy burnt offering, and I will go. Peradventure Yahweh will come to meet me. Whatsoever he shows me, I will tell thee. And he went to a high place. And it says, Elohim met Balaam, and he said, I have prepared 7 altars, and I have offered on every altar a bullock and a ram. And Yahweh put a word in Balaam's mouth. Return to Balak, and thus shall you speak. And so, when he opened his mouth, what came out? In verse 7, he said, he took up his parable and said, Balak, the king of Moab, has brought me from Aram out of the mountains of east, saying, come, curse Jacob, come, and defy Israel. How shall I curse whom Elohim has not cursed? How shall I defy whom Yahweh has not defied? From the top of the rocks I see him. From the hills I behold him. Lo, the people shall dwell alone. They shall not be reckoned among the nations. Who can count the dust of Jacob and the number of the 4th part of Israel? Let me die the death of the righteous, and let my last end be like his. They're like the sand on the seashore, and today they're even more all over the world. But he said, how can I go out? How can I say something Yahweh hasn't said? And so Balak was upset. He said, what have you done? I've brought you out here to bless them, and to curse them, and you've blessed them. And so they argued back and forth, and so he ended up 3 times he blessed them. After they'd moved to a different spot, they'd try it again, set up some more altars and do some more sacrifices. The next time in verse 18, the second time he took up a parable and said, rise up, Balak, and hear. Hearken to me, you son of Zippor. Elohim is not a man that he should lie, neither the son of man that he should repent. Hath he said, and shall he not do it? Hath he spoken, shall he not make it good? Behold, I have received commandment to bless, and he has blessed, and I cannot reverse it. And then he says, this is a very important verse right here. He says, he has not beheld iniquity in Jacob, neither has he seen perverseness in Israel. Now, how can he say that? After all they'd been through, after all the failures they'd had coming out of Egypt, all the sin that they had committed, and the unbelief, and all the people that died. But he said, he has not beheld iniquity in Jacob. Why did he say that? Well, it's reminiscent of the scripture where Psalmist David said, blessed is the man to whom Yahweh does not impute sin. Blessed is the man to whom Yahweh does not impute sin. So he was willing to overlook their sin. It's because Yahweh, his Elohim, is with him. In verse 21, the last part. And the shout of a king is among them. Elohim brought them out of Egypt. He hath, as it were, the strength of a unicorn. Surely there's no enchantment against Jacob. There's not going to be any spiritual word against Jacob. Neither is there any divination against Israel. According to this time, it shall be said of Jacob and Israel, what hath Elohim wrought? Behold, the people shall rise up as a great lion, and lift himself up as a young lion. He shall not lie down until he eat of the prey and drink the blood of the slain. And Balaam said, oh, no. Look what you've done. Don't say anything. Just don't curse him or bless anyone. Just stop. And so, again, they set up another altar, offered another bull, another ram on every altar. And in chapter 24, it says, when Balaam saw that it pleased Yahweh to bless Israel, he went not out as at other times to seek for enchantments, but he set his face toward the wilderness. And Balaam lifted up his eyes, and he saw Israel abiding in his tents according to their tribes. And the spirit of Elohim came upon him. And he took up this parable and said, Balaam, the son of Beor, has said, the man whose eyes are open, has said, which heard the words of Elohim, which saw the vision of the Almighty, falling into a trance, but having his eyes open. How goodly are thy tents, O Jacob, and thy tabernacles, O Israel. As the valleys are they spread forth, as gardens by the river's side, as the trees of line aloes which Yahweh has planted, as cedar trees beside the waters. He shall pour the water out of his buckets, and his seed shall be in many waters. His king shall be higher than Agag, and his kingdom shall be exalted. Elohim brought him forth out of Egypt. He has, as it were, the strength of a unicorn. He shall eat up the nations, his enemies, and shall break their bones and pierce them through with his arrows. He couched, he lay down as a lion, as a great lion. Who shall stir him up? Blessed is he that blesses thee, and cursed is he that curses thee. And Balak got all mad again. And then Balaam went on to further solidify this blessing. And then finally at the end of the chapter here, it says, Balaam rose up, returned to his place, and Balak also went his way. And we don't get the details here between chapter 24 and 25. But at some point, Balaam encouraged Balak to cause the children of Israel to eat things offered to idols and to commit fornication. And we read chapter 25, we see this is what's happening. But Balaam evidently was the one who encouraged this to happen. After all these mighty blessings that's been poured on his people, yet there was a departure. There was a failure on Israel's part. And in chapter 25, it says, Israel abode in Shittim, and the people began to come in whoredom with the daughters of Moab. So they began to commit fornication with these foreign women. And they called the people unto sacrifices of their gods. And the people did eat, and they bowed down to their gods. This is the sin of Balaam. And so Israel joined themselves to Baal Peor. This is a false god. It's a god of fertility and reproduction. And the anger of Yahweh was kindled against Israel. So Yahweh said, take up the heads of the people and hang them up before Yahweh against the sun, that the fierce anger of Yahweh may be turned away from Israel. And Moses said to the judges of Israel, slay every one of his men that were joined unto Baal Peor. And so they pronounced the sentence. This was so severe. And then in verse 6, it says, behold, one of the children of Israel came and brought into his brethren a Midianitish woman in the sight of Moses, in the sight of all the congregation of the children of Israel, who were weeping before the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. So he, in broad daylight, in front of everybody, knowing the crisis that's going on, he was flagrant enough just to do it right in front of everybody. And that's the way that Satan is. He has a boldness that requires reckoning. This Midianitish woman, the Midianites, Midian was the son of Abraham's second wife, Keturah. But this was a foreign woman who was not in the household of Israel. She was not repentant. These were not repentant people. These were people offering idols. They were offering their offerings to idols, and they were committing fornication. And so in verse 7, here's one of the heroes of the Bible here. In verse 7, when Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saw it, he rose up from among the congregation, took a javelin in his hand, and went after the man of Israel into the tent, and thrust both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through her belly. So the plague was stayed from the children of Israel. And those that died in that plague were 24,000. And so Yahweh spoke to Moses and said, Phinehas, this son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, has turned my wrath away from the children of Israel, while he was zealous for my sake among them, that I consumed not the children of Israel in my jealousy. So I've given him a covenant of peace. He shall have it, and his seed after him, even the covenant of an everlasting priesthood, because he was zealous for his Elohim and made atonement for the children of Israel. So Eleazar and his descendants had this legacy from then on because of Phinehas's actions that day. You know, at the end of this chapter, it says that Yahweh commands them to vex the Midianites, to be hostile towards them, to conquer them. He said, for they vex you with their wiles. So he tells them to vex them. Now, what would a modern day Phinehas look like today? I mean, somebody said that a lot of modern religious teaching consists of nice people telling nice people to be nice. And we've lost touch with the fact that we're in a war, and the stakes are very high. And I think we don't realize that the enemy is rapidly overtaking on many fronts. And oftentimes religion has become something for women and children, because the men go off to the drag strip or something to release their energy. But we're in a real war here, just like they were back then. You know, in Job 39, Yahweh describes a war horse pawing in the valley. He couldn't wait to get into the battle. He laughs at fear. He mocks at fear. He rages into the battle. He just rushes into the chance to fight in this battle. And we are to be men of war like that. We're to be exhilarated at the thought of going into battle. This is our calling. This is our job as men. It's like when David was a little boy, a young man, he couldn't wait to get to Goliath. He says, "Oh, let me at him. Let me go." You know, everybody else was holding back, but he couldn't wait. But we are told to fight the good fight. But we're also told to be gentle. How's that possible? Well, it's kind of like being a skilled brain surgeon. You go in and you carefully, meticulously do what you need to do without harming the patient. The sword is a sharp, two-edged sword, but we can't be reckless with it, like using a chainsaw. So, what can we do? What's the most pressing case of injustice you see around you? Is it the abortion, or is it lack of direction in the assembly, or is it a youth ministry, or whatever? Whatever you see lacking, that's where you need to step up. You might say, "Well, I'm all by myself." Well, if you're empowered by the Holy Spirit, you're not by yourself. You know, and when you step out, other people will begin to step with you. When they see that you're going in the right direction, when they see that you're doing something, they're more likely to join with you. People may be coming out of the woodwork that you never counted on. But He's given us the keys to the kingdom. But this context here of eating things sacrificed to idols, committing adultery, committing fornication, there are some people we're not even supposed to eat with, and we don't want to isolate ourselves from this world that we live in, but we do need to be sanctified. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 5. 1 Corinthians 5, verse 9. He said, "I wrote to you in an epistle not to company with fornicators." Now, if you're going to hang out with sinners, there's a place for that, but you need to make sure that you're influencing them. They're not influencing you. You don't want if they're going down the drain, they'll take you with them if you're not careful. But that's the whole test right now. Are you influencing them? Are they influencing you? I know a man who was trying real hard to witness to some young guys, and he got to hanging out with them. And over a period of years, he got sucked into the drug world again, and it ended up taking him out. And that's a heartbreaking story, but it's true. So he said, don't company with fornicators. In verse 10, he says, "Yet not altogether with the fornicators of this world, or with the covetous, or the extortioners, or the idolaters, for then you would have to go out of the whole world." So you're gonna have some interaction with sinners. But now he said, I have written unto you that not to keep company of any man that is called a brother, if he's a fornicator, or covetous, or an idolater, or a railer, or a drunkard, or extortioner. With such a one, no, not to eat. In other words, you can't buddy up with people who are complete hypocrites. If they claim to be believers and they're quoting the scriptures and they, like Balaam, they're going to take you down the wrong road. By the way, they were told to vex the Midianites, but also, if we read later in Joshua, it tells how they actually killed Balaam. The children of Israel killed Balaam. They overcame him. So he died a sinner's death. And in verse 12 here it says, for what have I to do to judge them also that are without? Do you not judge them that are within? We are to judge those in the body. We don't judge those outside of the body. But if someone claims to be a believer, we have to hold them accountable. We have to hold them up to a standard. He said, show my people, lift your voice like a trumpet, show my people their sins. There's a place for that. And he said in verse 13, them that are without, Elohim judges. Therefore, put away that wicked person from among you. So they had to judge those that are within. And then in 1 Corinthians 10, 1 Corinthians 10, verse 20. He said, I say the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils and not to Elohim. I would not that you have fellowship with devils. Now, some of you have heard of food products under the label of halal. That's Islamic version of kosher, I guess you'd say. That's Islamic approved foods. I don't buy that. I don't buy that stuff. And that's just one example. I'm sure there's many other less obvious, but I mean that's one example. But he said, have no fellowship with devils. There's no connection. So you probably just have to turn the TV clear off. But you cannot drink the cup of Yahweh and the cup of devils. You cannot be partakers of Yahweh's table and the table of devils. Do we provoke Yahweh to jealousy? Are we stronger than he? He said, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are expedient. All things are lawful for me, but not all things edify not. In other words, some things may technically be okay, but you got to look at the big picture. And then he says, let no man seek his own, but every man another's welfare. But to boil it all down, in verse 31, he said, whether you eat or whether you drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of Yahweh. Whether you eat or whether you drink, have all minute details, let it be for the glory of Yahweh. But there are some things that accompany salvation. Holiness is one thing that accompanies salvation. And a holy boldness. Now, there's a place for boldness. We don't need to be timid. That's a big problem. We don't need to be timid about the word. If you got the truth, if the house is on fire and you know it's on fire, it's not a time to be timid. It's time to be bold. Speak up. Don't let anybody intimidate you. Don't let anybody tell you it's not on fire. But there's holiness accompanies salvation. Holy boldness, self-control. These are things that accompany salvation. Joy, peace, love, patience, brotherly kindness. These are things that accompany salvation. If you're saved and you don't have some of these, if you're not leaning in that direction, then you need to rethink your salvation. If you're not pursuing these things, you're not seeing some evidence, then you need to go back to the original fountain. Now, there are some things that accompany idolatry. Some of those things are immorality. Idolatry and fornication, sexual immorality, usually are closely knit together. Which these things cause anxiety. You know, when you're sexually immoral on any level, there's going to be consequences for that. It's going to affect you physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. It's going to affect you, and it's going to affect the people around you. Think Sodom and Gomorrah. It affected all the people around them, didn't it? Self-indulgence. It's another thing that accompanies idolatry. Hatred, strife, jealousy, stinginess. These are things that accompany idolatry. So these are things that you need to look out for. But let's go to Acts 15. This is, the disciples were having a big meeting on what do we do with these Gentiles coming in? How do we bring them into the fold? What's required of them? In verse 12, it said, all the multitude gave silence, and they gave audience to Barnabas and Paul, declaring what miracles and wonder Elohim had wrought among the Gentiles by them. In other words, they'd seen miraculous things taking place with Gentiles' conversions. And after they had held their peace, James answered, now this was James, he answered and said, men and brethren, listen to me. Simeon has declared how Elohim at first did visit the Gentiles to take out of them a people for his name. And to this agree the words of the prophets, as it is written, after this I will return and build again the tabernacle of David, which is fallen down. And I will build again the ruins whereof I will set it up, that the rest of the men might seek after Yahweh, all the Gentiles upon whom my name is called, saith Yahweh, who doeth all these things. Notice his name is by his name is called. And I believe that's being invited there. But known unto Elohim are all his works from the beginning. Wherefore my sentence is that we trouble not them which are from among the Gentiles or turn to Elohim, but that we write unto them that they abstain from pollution of idols, from fornication, from things strangled, and from blood. Why? Because Moses of old time has in every city them that preach him, being read in the synagogues every Sabbath. So they didn't even say they had to be there on the Sabbath. That was assumed. That was just taken for granted. But these four things are very seldom mentioned in any Gentile Christian churches today. Well, sometimes fornication is, but it's interesting that there's food laws mentioned with sexuality a lot. Violation of food laws leads to violation of sexual laws too. There's consequences. There's a really good book called God's Key to Health and Happiness. It's an amazing book written by Elmer Josephson. And I want to read just a little paragraph from it. He goes through how there's consequences for disobedience and there's blessings for obedience. And he talks about all the different things in the scriptures that lead into that, including the dietary laws and the prescription about not eating blood, not eating fat. But this is one paragraph I want to read here. He said, there's no doubt that much sex perversion and sex excess that have led to tragedy and death have their roots in the disregard of this law. When the blood of beasts are taken into the human body, they create and stimulate animal passions beyond man's control. When we observe Yahweh's law, we will find a God-given control adequate to keep those normal procreative powers in check according to his divine plan and purpose. So much more could be said on the subject of blood, but it is sufficient that Elohim has prohibited it. Shall we obey God or man? Upon whose word shall we risk our health, our strength, our very lives? And that's just one part of that book, but I've heard that from other sources as well. And so these are the four things that are foundational just for entry into the household of faith. Now, there's very few people in life that have not sinned at some point in life in the area of sexuality. I mean, that's just a reality. But we don't need to accept that as a status quo, as a pattern, as a way of life. He has victory for us. But in 2 Peter 2, it says, there were false prophets among the people. See, we were talking about Balaam. He was a false prophet, wasn't he? Even so, there shall be false teachers among you, who privately shall bring in damnable heresies, even denying the master that bought them, and bring upon themselves swift destruction. And many shall follow their pernicious ways. Many today are following those pernicious ways, by reason of whom the way of truth shall be evil spoken of. And that's why a lot of people refuse to accept Christianity or the faith today, because they said, look at all the hypocrisy, look at all the deception, all the terrible things that are taking place in the name of Christianity. And so it's given them a bad name. And through covetousness, that's greed, through greed shall they with feigned words make merchandise of you. There you go. Whose judgment now of a long time lingers not, and their damnation slumbers not. For if Elohim spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment, and spared not the old world, but saved Noah the eighth person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them with an overthrow, making them an example to those that after should live ungodly. And what did Yahshua say about the end time when he came back? He said it would be like it was in the days of Sodom and Gomorrah, like it was in the days of Noah. So I'm convinced that's where we're at. And in verse 7 it says, it delivered just Lot, vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked. It vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. Do you feel vexed? Do you feel frustrated? Do you feel uneasy by what's going on around you? Let's go on down to verse 14. It says, having eyes full of adultery that cannot cease from sin, beguiling unstable souls, a heart they have that's exercised with covetous practices, cursed children, who have forsaken the right way and gone astray, following the way of Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness, but was rebuked for his iniquity. The dumb ass, speaking with a man's voice, forbade the madness of the prophet. See, this continual recurring pattern, we're seeing it still to this day. These are wells without water, clouds that are carried without tempest, to whom the mist of darkness is reserved forever. For when they speak great swelling words of vanity, they allure through the lust of the flesh, through much wantonness, those that were clean escape from them who live in error. So let's go back to Revelation 2 again. The message to the 7 churches of Asia. Revelation 2. Now this is the church at Thyatira. This is a different church, has a different message, but it's similar. It says, "These things saith the Son of Elohim, who hath his eyes like unto a flame of fire, his feet are like fine brass. I know thy works, and charity, and service, and faith, and patience, and your works, the last to be more than the first." What might he say to us today? He said, I know your works, all these things you've done, but in verse 20, notwithstanding I have a few things against you, because you suffer that woman Jezebel, which calls herself a prophetess, to teach and seduce my servants to commit fornication, to eat things sacrificed to idols. There's that combination again. And they're allowing this person to be there. They're not teaching it themselves, but they're allowing this other person to be there. And so that's the problem. He says, I gave her space to repent of her fornication, and she repented not. Behold, I will cast her into a bed, and them that commit adultery with her into great tribulation, except they repent of their deeds. So, these are things we don't need to worry about, but we need to pray about them. What does it mean to avoid things strangled? You know, somebody said, how do you know your Kentucky Fried Chicken is not a Kentucky strangled chicken? So these are things that are the foundational things throughout the Scriptures from A to Z. So we are to be men of war. What's that look like? I believe Stephen was an example of that. Stephen was bold. He had a holy boldness. He spoke the truth. It got him killed, but he accomplished his mission in life. He fulfilled his mission. He reached maturity at a young age. But those are things that accompany salvation. This holiness and this holy boldness. This is what we desire, and He desires to give it to us more than we even want it. But we got to lay our lives down to receive what He has for us. But let's be men of war. Let's be women of war. Let's be warriors. Now, our weapons are not carnal. They're not physical. For the most part, sometimes you do have to take physical actions. But it's basically it's not by might, not by power, but by my Spirit, saith Yahweh. That's the whole thing. And we're not going to have peace through violence. It doesn't come that way. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for your attention.